Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Future of XYZ. We have the honor of speaking with Kevin Lang about the future of ag tech. Kevin, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Lisa. I am a big fan and recent subscriber of your program, so keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm excited to have this conversation. I think ag tech is, one of these very mysterious subject matter for a lot of people. And at the same time, there are billions of dollars being poured into the investment sphere. And perhaps the future of ag tech is the future of agriculture in many ways.
Sure.
So let's just quickly, you obviously have a long background. We'll get into it. You were started as an engineer at John Deere. You've done consulting for Deloitte Monitor. You were seconded to the World Economic Forum in terms of emerging tech, but you've now been the CEO and president of AgriPoint, which is an ag tech firm. And we'll talk a little bit about what you guys do, which was founded in 2012, but you joined just about 2 years ago. So tell me first, what is ag tech by your definition?
Sure. No, we'll dig into that. So ag tech, it's probably one of the more easy tech suffix terms to actually interpret and understand. So, unlike deep tech or clean tech, ag tech is really just trying to apply technology to agriculture. So how do we cultivate land and soil to produce food, other nature-based products to support a thriving society? So it's really as simple as that. And then to break it down even further, I like to think about it just as a very simple equation. So on the top side of that equation, we're trying to maximize the productivity of an area of land. So how can we extract the most out of the most high quality, kind of nutritious food, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and cereal crops? And then on the other side of the equation, how do we decrease the amount of inputs that are used? So how do we reduce use of things like fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and in general, just reduce the environmental footprint of farming? And so an element of that is just preserving the soil for not just this season, but also future generations and seasons. So a large part of agriculture today is how do we implement sustainable farming and build towards this more harmonious, holistic, and then another word you'll hear is regenerative approach to farming going forward. And then the last kind of more recent piece or calculus in this equation is really on the carbon front. So carbon plants are a very good engine to sequester carbon into the soil. So using the photosynthetic capabilities of a plant, how can we capture carbon, take it out of the atmosphere and actually deposit those molecules in the soil? So there's a whole burgeoning industry and around this technology. And so you'll start to see ag tech start to kind of overlap and with climate tech as yes. well. So, but yeah, essentially ag tech, we're using technologies to address that equation, maximize land productivity and reduce the amount of inputs required.
It's so interesting. I think about ag tech and, you think about what modern farming is becoming, and it's becoming perhaps far more Silicon Valley-esque than, I don't know what we think about traditional farming. But of course, there are around the world, and we're seeing it obviously because of, climate change, we're seeing it because of war, and water supply and all this kind of stuff. You're seeing that there are small farms and there are very, very, very big commercial farms. This holds true in America as well. And ag tech has historically really looked at like the bigger farms, right? That's where it's been accessible. And yet what we're starting to see is this, as you say, it's about efficiency and sustainability, but as well as ultimately about profitability for these farms to be able to provide us our food or our feed or whatever it is that they're producing. So how do we, when we think about access and pricing, to ag tech, how do we even think about ag tech availability at this moment?
Yeah, so great question. And that has been one of the biggest hurdles to ag tech implementation is just cost and access. So it's been, traditionally some Silicon Valley companies, software engineers or hardware manufacturers that are coming out to sell to the ag industry with either lack of knowledge of that. And it's just the economics just haven't worked. So I think, one thing is understanding the industry that you're actually trying to address. But the second one is just has been a natural evolution of the technology itself. and technologies that are being used for all kinds of other applications, whether that's infrastructure, healthcare, and others that are just starting to emerge from a cost standpoint and irrelevant for agriculture. So agriculture is an industry. It's one of the hardest industries to actually implement, but also one of the most important industries that we have. And a lot of times a grower has very thin margins, a lot of unpredictable elements due to the weather and commodity prices that, that just put growers in a tough position. And, they can do some things to kind of hedge against that by, how they buy contracts or what crops they plant. But really, they need better information. And so, I think what's the most exciting kind of recent developments of agriculture, and as you said, it's becoming really agriculture is becoming ag tech driven, are access to these technologies. And so, if you think about the types of problems that a grower has access to solve now are, looking at understanding the soil. So soil analytics and, content of nitrogen and other beneficial elements of the soil, water management. So how do we optimize irrigation and reduce plant
disease
stress?
and pestilence, I guess, would be another piece of that.
Exactly, identifying disease. And so, identifying disease early and targeting that. And so you'll start to hear words like precision agriculture. And so precision agriculture is really targeting where areas of the field that you need to address are, and then implementing processes and tools and technologies to actually solve that. And so, yeah, all these tools are becoming better, like weather forecasting, actually being able to kind of predict how, weather and getting access to historical and future weather information. But then I think one of the areas, or the primary area that we play in as a company, is really sensors. So using new sensors, so IoT sense. Well, I've listened to some of your past podcasts. We don't do just initialisms or acronyms without finding. So Internet of Things sensors, right? So that can be anything from spaceborne satellites to drones to robotics, autonomous robotics that have sensors, and all the way down to, mobile phones, mobile devices as well. And so as the cost of these and availability of just these general technologies have gotten cheaper, now we're starting to see some more grower-centric platforms that really eliminate a large expense for this technology. And the last thing I'll say is, we really focus on, how can we deliver a product, whether that's a software with an algorithm embedded, or a mode for data capture, without having to have the grower purchase something that they don't already own for another reason. So we'll talk maybe a bit about smartphones. We can do a lot with the sensors that are now embedded in a smartphone. So the optical stack of an iPhone 12 Pro here, if we can use that as a data collection device, and that farmer, grower, or conservationist can use it for other purposes, then we've eliminated that economic barrier for data capture and for analytics. Same with satellites. You see new constellations going up and new announcements happening weekly. So how can we use those combined approaches of Earth observation data that's readily available, combined with tools that they already have in their pocket, or sensors that are becoming available on a tractor or a piece of irrigation equipment that they already own. So I think that level of approach, not making the farmer actually come out of pocket for a large capital expense, it's really going to help them get access to information without really breaking up the economics of that farming operation.
Well, that makes so much sense, because what we're really talking about is, like, you have the input tech, whether it's satellites, drones, robotics, or these IoT sensors, right? Or your phone. And then the service that a lot of ag tech companies are providing, besides those sensors and things on the input, are in fact going to be the platform technology, or the platform, that allows, 3D point clouds and smartphone integrations and readouts and all these things that do the things that you're talking about, whether that's carbon, monitoring and even certification, or the soil, or the yields, or the diseases. I mean, when you showed me the model that AgriTech has, on the citrus fruits, which is, I think, where you guys, came to
start,
be.
yeah.
These 3D models of a particular tree that a farmer then can have access to understand all of these things, that really is about, at the end of the day, the impact or the transformative power of ag tech, when used correctly, is actually crops for food, serves and benefits all of humanity, right? We need to eat, and we need more fresh, and we need more. We need a lot more. So that's really seems to be the problem that's being solved. However, I mean, let's talk about AgriPoint for a second, because I think the technology is unique and, kind of this geospatial intelligence, data, et cetera. Talk
Sure.
about like a case study, for instance, of the agronomic transformation that is empowered to, say, a mid-sized farm.
Yeah. So I think first, maybe defining kind of what we do in that area that we play in, and maybe a couple of the enabling technologies. But AgriPoint really focuses on how we measure. So in order to understand the impact of a decision a grower's making, or the efficacy of a new genetic or crop protection product from a research and development organization, you have to have measurements. And so some of these IoT sensors like satellites and drones, et cetera, they've been providing a lot of promise, especially at the field level or macro level. But what AgriPoint's really focus on is measurements at the plant level. And so we're building a spatial data platform for agriculture and climate insights. But the key enabler is precise, like automated plant level analytics. And you mentioned 3D models, so we're literally creating three-dimensional models, and then we're taking the digital twin concept out of the infrastructure world and the built environment and applying that to agriculture. And so once we have that kind of truth of record, we can do all kinds of fun things with it. We can give it a home, give it an address, a geolocation using GPS and real-time kinematic technology to very precisely know where that plant is, track it year over year throughout the season, and then use machine learning technology to actually rip a bunch of information right off of that. So how tall is that plant? What's the canopy structure look like? What's the biomass look like? Where is fruit? How much fruit? And how big is that fruit? Will that fruit fit through production equipment that the grower owns or that a large food and beverage company owns? So we're taking what in the past was either lack of available data or taken through manual measurements or through two-dimensional types of views, and we're turning that into really rich data, almost like creating an MRI type technology instead of an X-ray, that we can get this really rich data set on. So that's really the first thing that we do. And then the second piece is, how do we manage it? So we have this spatial data management platform that can be viewed on desktop or a phone, to really organize these digital twins and extract information off of it. And so our thought is that we can give this information directly to the growers that they can actually capture themselves or tap and access through other means, or that's coming directly from the equipment that they're using, and help them solve these problems. And so, some of the problems you mentioned, if you want to get into like very specific cases, are, holy grail of agriculture many times is yield estimation and prediction. So, for a specific plant or row or area of the field, how much fruit do they expect to have? And then, there's all kinds of downstream supply chain implications for that. So it's quantity of fruit and it's quality of fruit. And I think the other element of that is, if you talk to anyone in agriculture right now, especially production agriculture, one of the largest problems is labor. It's like labor. So if we can provide better information to either, for one, like reduce the amount of like diseases that or catch them early, but I think from a harvest standpoint, understand when to deploy labor, where to deploy labor, and help certain parts of the field get harvested and picked, to reduce spoilage. Like a large element of food waste in the food supply chain is literally spoilage that happens in the field before harvest, like 30 to 40% in some cases. So, and if you think about doing, your carbon or sustainability calculations, like what's the impact of that alone? Yeah. Right? How much water did you have to use for those almond or those blueberries?
It's waste. It's
waste, and it's unforeseen in the retail. Then you have this whole other kind of duplicative effects as you go through the retail chain when when it hits the shelves, or then after it doesn't get eaten from the plate. So we're trying to help solve some of those problems with better information, through better sensors, cheaper available access to sensors, and then summarizing this data in ways that you can interpret and understand.
Like, I mean, that's the thing with data sometimes, is we have so much data. It's like, then what do you do with it? And this seems very action oriented. What I find really interesting about what we're talking about with ag tech is it's so obvious that it has applications across the entire value chain. applications, but as well as implications. And I'm thinking about, you have suppliers of the kind of, let's call it raw ingredients for, seed, fertilizer, tractors, et cetera. So you have an implication there. You have an implication, obviously, with the growers themselves, a big one. That's like where you guys are focused. And that's an obvious point of reckoning, whether you're small, mid, or large scale. Then you have the manufacturers, as you said, the food and beverage companies themselves, right? And then you have the consumer. I mean, I think we're taking a little stab here, Kevin. As I said, I'm trying to start wrapping these up shorter than I usually do. So I find myself struggling a little bit, but I want to talk about the consumer, because the consumer piece of this and the implication. I mean, I'm thinking about certification on carbon neutrality, for instance, the promises that people are making. How are you using soil? What kinds of things are you putting in? I mean, there's so much talk about how tech can enable transparency and accountability in terms of sustainability writ large. How do you see AgTech helping and contributing to that, if at all?
I think that's one of the most exciting pieces. It's you're doing two things. You're providing better information to the consumer to make better choices about their food, and then also you're holding the whole supply chain accountable. And I don't think it's really holding the farmers accountable. I think that they're a lot of times doing the right thing, but they're not getting a lot of times the premium that they're putting on for doing those right things. Right? They're getting great farmers are getting lumped in with maybe large operations that aren't as attentive to detail or food quality. So this real targeted type of evaluation of quality of crops and growing practices is really, I think, beneficial to really align the value back where it should be. And then, you mentioned carbon. So pretty much every Fortune 500 or large company that exists today has come out with some type of net zero goal or target, right? Yeah. So commitment, yeah. It's great to see all the funds that are going behind that market and some of the innovation that's happening there. And I really hope this time, and I believe this time, it's going to really provide some real impact. But the measurement piece in that whole marketplace, I think that's a big opportunity that AgTech and we are, as a company, even using these digital twins of plants. I really think that there's a quite an impact to be had there for the holding folks accountable and truly measuring the impact of carbon projects, right? Is what's planted actually even still there, or is the biomass of that area of plant truly represented into the amount of carbon that land is sequestering. And so big opportunity that we have accountability, and then we just have better access to information all across the food value chain.
Absolutely. It's so fascinating, Kevin. There are so many more things that we could touch on in this conversation. We're not going to today. I really appreciate your time and your expertise, and congratulations on everything that AgriPoint is doing. It's it's pretty exciting stuff.
Thanks, Lisa. My pleasure.
And for everyone listening to Future of XYZ, if you don't already subscribe, like Kevin just recently did, make sure you do so on YouTube or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And you can also follow Future of XYZ on Instagram or visit future-of.xyz to learn more, access any of the old episodes, as well as to nominate yourself or someone you know as a future guest. You better be as smart and interesting as Kevin. And Kevin, thank you for sharing all your great expertise, and we'll look forward to catching back up with you another time.
Sounds great. Thanks again, Lisa.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.